Welcome back, everybody. I want to talk to you today about blocking out using the modeling kit inside of Unreal. I want to start off by saying the modeling kit in Unreal is very robust, but it is by no means a modeling environment as a primary discipline. So do not use Unreal the same as you would use Maya or Blender. It's meant to do patchwork, support slight adjustments, but it is not the primary place where you should be doing your modeling and UVs and animation and things like that. So take that in mind as we approach this as a level designer and how we could use the modeling toolkit to help us in our blockout and prototyping process. So to access modeling, first thing we're going to do is go up to our mode dropdown and select modeling. This is Shift 5, and it'll give you a new menu. This menu has a number of resources, default primitives that you would expect, as well as a few other shapes. To add any of these ones into the environment, what we're going to do is just click on it. It'll give us a set of configurations that we can use. By default, you have the default texture that goes onto this, but I've added a checkerboard texture just for demonstrative purposes. But then I get to go place this in the world. So I'm going to go ahead and place this one right here. And you can see that the object has been placed. We can still move it. We can still modify it. As we go down, we can increase the number of faces that are on each subdivision. And this is easier viewed in the wireframe mode. Just pressing Alt-2 to get that mode. And so I can increase the number of subdivisions here. If I wanted to make something a little bit more reasonable, maybe do 2 and 2, will give us a subdivided cube that will allow us to edit and modify things later. Once I like the layout of the model that I have, I can go press the accept key. And once I press accept, I want to make sure to deselect some of these tools. If you have a current mesh selected, when you add a new object, it's going to add it to that base. So just be mindful to deselect things before you activate it. Different options for what you have here. We have the ability to extrude a polygon. You can see that the grid has been overlaid here. Then I can start to create irregular shapes. As I close that, then I can move my mouse up and down and allow me to extrude that shape to whatever I need it to be. And I can click complete there. And then I also have the ability to draw a spline. So if I draw a spline, I get the ability to have these more curved shapes. And with those, if I say accept, then I can do a mesh spline from that. And that mesh spline is a separate actor, so I can still have my spline present in the world afterwards once I accept this. If I move this around, you see the spline is here. The spline is not informing the shape. The shape has already been derived from the spline, but it allows me to get a little bit more organic shapes and curves and things like that. And a lot of these tools can be used in the orthographic views as well. We also have the ability to extract a spline. So if I have a model here, if I choose the orientation that I want, I can pull a spline off of the model based off of what it sees as the intersection of that plane and the model. And we have the ability to revolve a path. So this is really handy if you wanted to do something like build columns. So if I wanted a column, I could just draw a line. Obviously this is fairly simple, but when I do that, it creates the column. It'll basically lathe that around a surface. And then if I wanted to, I could do a hollow object as well with that. If I wanted to do it here, it's going to go around that line of symmetry. So one problem that I have with this as a level designer is that these do not have collision on them. If I go to play from here, straight through the world. And this is problematic because I probably want to be able to interact with these things for blockouts and whatnot. So the most common tool that we're going to use for blockouts is actually Cube Grid, where you get this little grid and you can click and drag and you can push and pull. Details Q and E will give you the shortcuts for that, and it's actually quite rapid for building out content. If you wanted to, let's say, add a ramp here, I can just select the surface, switch to corner mode, or press Z, and then I can select my corners and then drop those down. And now I very quickly have a ramp to a roof with an awning. And you can see where this can get pretty quick in the implementation. So as you accept this, knowing that these are different objects, oops, see I didn't deselect, and now I have this as part of that. If I wanted to make this collidable, I have to go through a few steps. The first thing I could do is to add collision inside of the modeling kit. So I can come down to maybe the attributes, and I could do a simple collision editor, and I can say add box, and then it's going to try and give me a box that I can scale and position to exactly where I want it to be. And this could be handy if you have like one or two things, but trying to place, you know, the boxes for this, we're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 boxes to position these, and the tools for this are not as precise as some people may want. So one thing that we can do to expedite this process is to go into the asset itself. So these have created static meshes that I can reference inside of the viewer, inside the content browser. So when I click on the object, I can do a browse to asset, Control B, and it'll take me right to that. You'll notice that the assets generated are in a folder that is adjacent to the level that was being edited when the content was created. So if I go into the generated folder, then it's going to list all the assets that I created. So if I wanted to have more of those columns, I can just click and drag that column out into the world. It's not a unique, distinct item, and then I can have all these different instances of the static mesh in the world. So while that's very handy, that doesn't necessarily get us the thing that we want, which is to be able to step on this actor. So when I have this object, we're going to rename this. We're going to call this M overlook structure. All right, so this structure right now, if I wanted to view it, I can double click on it here, and it'll open up inside of my asset viewer, or I can have the asset selected and press Control E, and that'll bring that up as well. So that's problematic. So we're gonna get rid of that asset over there. So when I come back to my modeling kit, if I go to select, we can do poly edit. If I go to my top view and I select all these ones and I delete and accept, now I have just this asset, but my pivot point is all the way over here. So I can come down to my X-form and choose the pivot, edit pivot. And so I can put this exactly where I want it to be in relationship to my asset. When I click accept, then that will be it for every instance of that asset. Now if I bring that asset out here, the collision is exactly in the same relative spot for that asset. So going back to our editor, I'm looking at this asset and I want to add collision. Inside of our asset editor for meshes, we have the ability up here and collision on the top to add a box collision. So if I add the box collision, you can see that I have added this green line box that is showing me where the collision is for this asset. This is helpful in adding geometry to simple objects like walls, floors, and ceilings that are rectangular. However, you can see immediately there's a problem in that it doesn't reflect the geometry that I'm interacting with. So coming back to the asset, if I want to remove that collision, I have the option of getting more complex collisions. So if I go to one of the more complex ones, you'll see it's better but still not good. And then I can come down to the auto-convex, and I get this dialog box up here. So if I crank up all the details, one, this will take a second to generate, but two, you can see even as close as it is to the geometry, it's still problematic. And if you've ever played a game where movement matters, then you'll know that having these collisions not represented by the geometry can be problematic and frustrating for the player. So we're going to apply that just to show that it works the same. So when I generate those collisions, if I wanted to, I could drop down here a little bit off the edge. You can see that the imprecision in the collision is an issue. And if I come over here to show collision, Alt-C, you can see this edge right over here wasn't very precise, so I got kind of skated off the edge. So not the best. Coming back to the model, I can remove this, and we have another option that works for us. And this is not an ideal long-term solution, but for blocking in most static objects, this is actually a completely viable solution for simple geometry like this. I have the asset editor open, and I'm going to scroll down until I get to the collision section. When I go down to the collision section, there's an option here for collision complexity. By default, simple and complex is what the project default is. So the project default is going to show this. Use simple collision as complex collision. Says if you have a collision like the green bounding boxes that is accurate for how you want it to be treated for physics, then it will use that. Sometimes for physics purposes, you want to use the more complex collision for like throwing particles to bounce off of a wall or allowing deformations through fracture and things like that. What we're going to use is use the complex collision as simple. What this says is to use the model wireframe as the wireframe for the collision. So when I do this, you'll notice that this entire thing now gets highlighted. This complex collision is being used for the simple collision. When I go and I get back into my level, if I now right click and play from here, when I walk across the surface, you can see that I can move exactly where I would expect to move as I interact with the environment. So thinking about the way that you can use these blocking tools, be mindful that the collision creation is a process you're going to need to attend to. If in the early stage of the project you just want to do a bunch of modeling and set the default for use complex as simple, you can do that, but just know that you're going to want to change that as you add more complex geometry to the environment, because it does add a little bit of inefficiency with each asset, and every instance of that asset is going to add more inefficiency because it's a physics calculation. Those don't get aggregated like instances of materials and meshes. Those are calculated on a per instance basis. So just be mindful of that as you go to build out the environment. So the modeling toolkit, it's helpful. It's especially good for visualization because it's extremely rapid. Hopefully they'll bring back the ability to have collision built in by default, or give some more optimized collision editing tools. But as you go in, probably the big takeaway is the block out for CubeGrid, and then of course the ability to change the pivot on any asset that you run into. This doesn't have to be used only on static meshes that are built in Engine. These are static meshes that are imported. If the pivot's wrong, when you edit the pivot, it'll edit it in the asset, not just in the instance. So hopefully this has been helpful to you. Hopefully this gives you an idea of some resources you can use while creating blockout's, and hopefully it lets you keep building.